Let's talk about relations between Australia and China. They've been getting worse all year, and that's very much carrying on. 2 Australian journalists have fled China because of fears they were going to be detained. Here they are, boarding their flight home. That's Mike Smith on the left. He works for the newspaper The Australian Financial Review, and that's Bill Birtles on the right. He's from ABC, Australia's national broadcaster. They spoke to the press when they arrived in Sydney.
It's so good to be home, so happy. I can't say any more at the moment, but it's such a relief to be home, so really happy.
Did you feel threatened at all when you were over there?
A little bit, yes.
Very disappointing to have to leave under those circumstances, and it's a relief to be back in a country with genuine rule of law.
Now, this is a really significant moment. These men were the last 2 journalists working for Australian media organisations in China. Here's Bill Birtles telling the BBC more about what happened.
It was a whirlwind week where, to me, this kind of came out of nowhere. Last Monday, I got a call advising me that I needed to leave China immediately. This was the Australian officials, and they'd received some sort of a warning or advice. They never specified what, but they said, our advice is for you to get out quick smart, which is not easy during COVID.
Well, Bill Birtles was preparing to take that official advice when things escalated anyway. Here he is on how.
And then sure enough, at midnight on the Wednesday, 6 state security police plus a translator were at my door in Beijing, not to detain me, but to inform me that I'm involved in a national security investigation, that there's an exit ban placed on me and I'm not allowed to leave the country.
Well, the national security investigation Bill mentions there is a reference to a case of this journalist, the Australian citizen Chung Lei. She's a respected business presenter and reporter for China's state-owned television network, CGTN. And in August, she suddenly stopped appearing on screen and ceased all contact with friends and family. Her profile and interviews were also wiped from CGTN's website. Well, now the Chinese government has confirmed she has been detained and she's being accused of spying. Here's China's foreign ministry spokesperson.
The relevant departments recently took compulsory measures in accordance with the law against Australian national Chung Lei, who was suspected of criminal activity endangering China's national security, and we are conducting an investigation. Her various rights and interests are all receiving full legal protection.
Well, the treatment of Chung Lei prompted Australia's government to warn Bill Birtles and Mike Smith to leave. They then took refuge in the Australian embassy for 4 days while diplomatic negotiations secured their freedom. But they weren't allowed to leave China without submitting to police interviews first. And during those interviews, they were asked about Chung Lei. Here's Bill Birtles again.
I know her, but not particularly well. It didn't really seem like I would be the most logical person to interrogate if you wanted evidence about her case. So they did ask me about that. They also asked me about Hong Kong national security law, and when I report on that, what sort of channels do I go to get my information? There was also a bit of back and forth about the general Australia-China relationship. You just got the general sense from the whole process that this was all part of a bigger political game, and myself and Mike Smith, the other journalist, we were simply small pawns in a much bigger dispute.
Let's pick up on what Bill was saying there. We should definitely see this story in the context of worsening relations between Australia and China, and there are a number of reasons behind this deterioration. Australia has raised concerns over China's treatment of Uyghur Muslims and over its treatment of pro-democracy activists in Hong Kong. Australia has also banned the Chinese company Huawei from involvement in building Australia's 5G network, and it stopped Australian state governments from doing business deals with Beijing independently. And perhaps most significantly, in April, Australia called for an international investigation into how the coronavirus pandemic started, and so put a question mark against China's claim that it's been transparent about what happened. Here's more from our Sydney correspondent, Shaimaa Khalil.
Look, this has been going on for weeks and months now. You mentioned Australia wanting and backing an international investigation into the origins of COVID-19. That infuriated Beijing, even though they wouldn't admit it. They said that this was political targeting for China. And since then, really, there's been a back and forth, accusations and counter accusations.
Now, to state the obvious, relations with China matter a great deal to Australia. China is its biggest trading partner and accounts for more than 30% of Australia's exports. And China knows this all too well, and it's putting the squeeze on. It's put an 80% tariff on Australian barley exports. It's suspended some Australian beef exports, and it's floated the idea of boycotting Australian wine. The treatment of these Australian journalists is perhaps another form of retaliation. Here's Shaimaa again.
By anybody's standard, what happened with those two journalists is a worrying development. China is not only Australia's key partner and the biggest customer for its natural resources, but as the ABC's news director Gaven Morris said, it is one of their most important stories.
China, understanding China, the relationship between our two countries is probably the biggest story of our time, and having our people on the ground working with our local team to tell that story is absolutely critical to the ABC.
Australia is, of course, a strong supporter of media freedom, freedom of the press, and that it is disappointing that after many years Australia will not have a media organisation present in China for some period of time.
Bill Birtles and Michael Smith were the last two correspondents working for Australian media in China. Their evacuation means that now, for the first time since the 1970s, Australian media organisations do not have accredited journalists inside the country.